トラップ発動デュエルの始まりだ
That was really bad.
You know, funny enough, when I'm talking about villains, and in particular Yu-Gi-Oh villains, I haven't really made a video concerning the Yu-Gi-Oh 5D ones. Well, unless you count certain Burn Brain as a villain. But my comedic dislike for the feather-haired duelist aside, Yu-Gi-Oh 5D's villains to me have usually been a bit of a mixed bag here and there. This isn't to talk about the quality of the writing, though that is an issue at some points. This is just a matter of preference. And I'm sure I'm going to get a targeted pain on my back, but I found a majority of 5D's villains to be a bit too serious for my taste. But the most iconic moment I can recall revolving a Yu-Gi-Oh villain from 5D's is... Now, obviously, you're more than welcome to disagree, beauty of opinions and all that jazz, but there are still some good villains in Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds. And one I want to talk about in this video is... Kiryu. Wrong Kiryu. And I think we should talk about this guy, the man who has the closest to defeat the main character Yusei Fudo, and subsequently talk about his redemption, focusing on what many people consider to be one of the best arcs in the Yu-Gi-Oh series, Crashtown. By the way, I expect you guys to have at least seen some of my videos pertaining to the cast of Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds. They're fun videos, go check them out, but spoilers nonetheless, but I am expecting you to understand a little bit about 5Ds. Anyway, let's go! A good question to start off with is, who is this silver-haired fool? Well, that is a great question, especially when you consider that for all intents and purposes, Kiryu is an important character to at least 3 of the main cast. Oh, and if you're a dub heretic, he goes by Colin Kessler, but I prefer Kiryu. Why, you may ask? Because I can make jokes to another Kiryu. Anyway, Kiryu here is a major part of Yusei Fudo's, Jack Atlas's, and Crow Hogan's backstories, all the while they lived in Satellite, all part of being a dueling gang known as Team Satisfaction.
We wanted to have the gayest band name in the world, but unfortunately Coldplay was already taken.
Or, again, if you're with the dub, the Enforcers. Personally, I like Team Satisfaction. It's got a real good ring to it, and besides, if you know anything about me and my channel,
satisfied. You are set free.
you know I'm all for that. Anyway, with Kiryu at the lead, Team Satisfaction would act as a pseudo-family and try to take over the Satellite via other gangs. For those who need a quick refresher, Satellite was an island city that was cut off from Neo-Domino City, where its inhabitants were forced to work at various factories there, where they would be regarded as scum or trash by the people of Neo-Domino. To make it short, it was a slum district filled with poor folks, orphans, and criminals, and it's the hometown for everyone in Team Satisfaction. Having grown up on the slum streets and living in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe,
I'm really good at playing card games! And that's what life is really all about anyway!
There were roaming gangs of duelists who would take sections of a satellite as their territory. Team Satisfaction would be one of those gangs, and since 3 out of the 4 are in the main cast, they all had noble goals in their hearts: to save Satellite from these gangs. Time passed and they slowly began to take over the territory from the other gangs, and when they did, Kiryu began to shift his personality, slowly becoming more and more extreme with his methods and goals. He then decided to go out to the police force in Yu-Gi-Oh 5D's, Sector Security, going to the extremes.
だが奴は弾けた。
トラップ発動デュエルの始まりだ
And when this happened, the rest of Team Satisfaction effectively tried to stop Kiryu from continuing his assault, but that didn't stop the worst from happening.
俺たちがさてないとやろう離せ言えてセキュリティをぶっ潰すんだ
Kiryu had assaulted an officer and was about to kill him. Yusei managed to stop him at the last second, but because eventually the crew was cornered by sector security and with how things looked, it looked to Kiryu that Yusei had sold him out.
だろか違う俺は許せ
Now, with all that brought up, we cut to a later time, showing that Kiryu was viciously abused in the jail by the guards, constantly beaten up, starved, and was on the verge of death, until they accepted a deal from a disembodied voice to become a Dark Signer. And to make something clear, a Dark Signer is effectively the big bads of the first half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and the only way one can become a Dark Signer is, well, you have to die, and then be revived by an Earthbound Immortal. And because of that, he was fueled to get revenge on Yusei, Kiryu believing that he was wronged by his former friend. Eventually, he would have his chances at revenge, and honestly speaking, if Yusei's D-Wheel hadn't broken in their first match, Kiryu would have most likely have won. So we have ourselves a pretty interesting character, a former friend of the main character who basically went power-hungry, made a lot of mistakes, and blamed his situation on the said main character. Then dying, being resurrected with the belief that he was betrayed and given a chance to take his revenge, Kiryu was at the very least an interesting villain and one I believe was a good antagonist to Yusei, especially if you look at them at thematic angle. One of the driving themes in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is bonds, with Yusei being the main part of being a bond, and essentially, Kiryu is the antithesis, someone who effectively broke the bonds he had with almost everyone because of the obsession of taking over Satellite, and that even made him believe that the one friend who still wanted to help him had actually betrayed him. I don't believe it's a complete subversion of the bond theme, but it was one that played around with, especially when we're shown directly that Yusei was actually trying to take the fall for Kiryu. Eventually though, the story does what the story does, and Yusei defeats Kiryu.
桐生桐生お前は俺の仲間だ俺は仲間のためお前のために
And Kiryu dies. Nah, sorry, he's alive. Yeah, almost all the Dark Signers after that arc were pretty much revived after the final battle, which is fine. I mean, it did mess with some dramatic tension, but hey, that's not a problem, especially with what we'll be getting into in the next part of this video. But before we get into that, I need to let you guys understand something. Kiryu was a popular character in the show. No joke. The guy at the time was one of the closest duelists to defeat Yusei. He had a great design, a tragic backstory, and his dueling strategy, Infernity, was a powerful deck. And he became a fan favorite, especially since in the second half of the series, he got himself a dedicated arc that we'll be talking about for the remainder of this video. Point is, Kiryu was a great character to the fans, and considering the setup, it was a great idea for what's to come, which is... Later in the second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, there was a dedicated mini-arc, Crashtown. It's a 7-episode bracket that's dedicated to Kiryu, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The arc begins with Yusei receiving a letter from someone telling him that he needs to save his friend, Kiryu.
不動雄星様、あなたと彼の間柄、友情をお聞きしてこのような手紙を書いて送ってください。彼はこの町に殺されてしまいます。
If the clips didn't give it away, there's an obvious Western theme going on. Desert towns, saloons, the classy-ass flower shop, the eventual poncho that Yusei will wear over his futuristic clothing, which is screaming. The point is that this got this whole Western vibe going on, and that's on purpose, because this whole arc is heavily inspired by the Clint Eastwood film A Fistful of Dollars. Yeah, not even kidding. Watch as my YouTube channel gets banged because of that clip. And there are a ton of references, other than the obvious poncho that Yusei dons, the warring gangs, and the town square showdown at sundown. Hell, even the duel discs in this arc are styled after revolver pistols. Whoever can draw their duel disc in hand first gets the first turn. They even got the tumbleweed, a staple of westerns. I want to point out this entire arc has the Western style that makes it stand out from the rest of the entire season, or hell, even the entire series, which was mostly cyberpunk and dystopian. The Western theming and setting instantly makes this entire mini-arc stand out, and honestly, I kinda wish we got more of this in place of filler that 5Ds had. Do this level of detail for the rest of the main cast, but regardless, the history of Crashtown is that a local mountain is filled with rare minerals, dine, that is used in the production of D-Wheel. It was a modern-day Yu-Gi-Oh! Gold rush, with two gangs, the Malcolm and Ramon family, families, taking over the mountain and setting up competitions for workers to dig up the minerals. And this would be determined by dueling. Winners of the duels would receive lots of money. Meanwhile, the losers would be dragged off to the mines, forced to excavate the minerals for the rest of their days.
勝ったが
And we're shown earlier in the opening episode that those who are forced to be there will be equipped with shock collars that prevent them from escaping. So why is Kiryu here? We're told that Kiryu is looking for a place to die, mainly because the memories of him being a Dark Steiner are haunting him.
なぜ思い出したあの記憶を。俺の拭いがたい罪。なぜ優勢が。いや、やはりと言うべきか。
And one thing I neglected to mention was that Dark Steiners caused a lot of destruction and even sacrificed the souls of several people, all to bathe the world in darkness. And the fact that he tried to effectively kill one of his own friends, Kiryu's guilt is holding him down, and the only way he can actually redeem himself is to die. However, Kiryu has only one thing that's keeping him alive, and that's duel monsters. So he's allowing duel monsters to control his fate, seeing how far he can live until he loses and is forced into the mines where he can find his death. The show makes it a point because he uses a little bit more of a luck-based deck now, and that's kind of risky. That's a pretty heavy path of destruction where Kiryu believes that the only thing he can do is duel until he dies. Unfortunately, Yusei's been called out, and with all the style of Eastwood, he's here to save Kiryu.
あの男はどういう思いで。
And thanks to a woman named Barbara who informed Yusei of Kiryu, Yusei joins the opposing faction in order to face Kiryu, defeat him, and save him before he can be dragged to the mountain. It's a brilliant setup, rife with drama, tension, with two friends duking it out, one wanting to die, the other wanting to save the other one.
何がどうでもいい。生きていても死んでいても。どうして。だが俺は思い出してしまったんだ。 些細な誤解から俺はお前たちを憎み恨みそして死に追いやろうとした仲間だったのに友だったのに桐生だがそれはあの最後の戦いでラストデュエルで全て洗い流されたはずじゃなかったのか罪という傷が俺の中に残った桐生
And even though Yusei says the previous duel settled things, ending the grudge, Kiryu was a Dark Steiner, he held on to that guilt, and the scars of making his friends suffer and even almost killing one of them with his own hands still weigh heavily on his heart. The words from Yusei are fine, but the guilt of something like that can't just be washed away, at least in Kiryu's mind. So it's up to Yusei to defeat Kiryu, save him from the town, and... Well, son of a bitch. Yeah, as it turns out, it wouldn't be that easy. Yusei was just being used to take out Kiryu, so the real antagonist of the arc can appear.
こいつは一体
Guns and duel discs. Throw in a couple of whiskey sours and you got my usual Saturday night. Meet the younger brother of the boss that Yusei joined up with, Lawton. Not that I normally do this, but Lawton's English voice actor has a bit of a history of being in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime.
That's right, and it looks like I got here just in time.
One of my favorite roles he played would be...
What's the holdup? Forgive me. How do I start this contraption? Just push the on button.
Anywho, the whole idea was for the Malcolm family to take over the towns and mines, but with Q being practically unbeatable, they needed a pawn to remove the obstacle, and that's what Yusei was used for. But with his usefulness no longer here, Yusei gets tossed into a casket, and with him, Kiryu and the Ramon family head get dragged into the mountain in order to live out the rest of their days mining out Dine. And it's not a great work environment.
So ここは山に送られた人々の
Yeah, lots of people have actually died from being worked to death in this mountain, to the point where they had to make a graveyard. Which, when you consider that the possibility that Kiryu was the one who sent most of these people to the fate, yeah, that's not doing any favors on the self-guilt he's got going on.
デュエルに敗れた者たちだ。俺が殺したも同然じゃないか。
Of course, if you're watching, you'll probably notice that Yusei and Kiryu managed to escape their fate, but it didn't last long, with Lawton finding them. Insert duel between Yusei and Lawton. Don't get me wrong, this arc had a lot of fun duels, and even showcased that Lawton was a real threat on the dueling field, since he had the ability to unleash a powerful one-turn kill with Gatling Ogre, a card that thankfully isn't an actual card, and the son of a bitch, it's actually being made into a card, but ultimately it's not really important for what we're talking about. We're talking about redemption, and the fact that Kiryu throughout this is being supported, not just by Yusei, but from some kids he inspired while he was in Crashtown.
どうしてなんだ。どうしてお前たちはそこまで俺を。
僕、桐生兄ちゃんに教わったんだよ。ずっとこの街で戦い続けてきた桐生兄ちゃんのかっこいい姿に。この街で父ちゃんを助け出すことがすっげえ難しくても、桐生兄ちゃんのように諦めず戦い続けていれば、いつかきっと願いが叶うって。
That even despite his nihilistic mindset and his path of self-destruction, Kiryu was able to inspire hope into others. And that's really the turning point for Kiryu, as what he's doing is attempting to protect not only his own life, but the lives of these kids, and even the father who was put to work in the mines, even if it doesn't last that long. It's effectively something that's pulling Kiryu out of the endless pit of despair, all the while being a badass. And it's always a trip remembering that Yugioh 5Ds wasn't afraid of laying the smackdown on people outside the dueling field, at least in the subbed version. Kinda refreshing just to see a guy kick someone's ass in a card game anime. Anyway, the point is that this incident and him saving people is the spark that reignites whatever tiny flicker of the old Kiryu has left, the guy who once led Team Satisfaction with hope, not just despair. And even though despair can really wreck whatever hope you have, especially when it's at the expense of someone's life or you attempting to hurt someone, so long as you live, that's merely a stepping stone to the future.
今度は俺が見せてやる。桐生京介の生き様を。お前たちを必ず守ってやる。
桐生さん。
しっかり捕まってろよ。
Of course, with this arc not done yet, we still need to break down Kiryu one more time, with Lawton almost killing Yusei and Kiryu, taking the kids hostage, and with Barbara tricking his brother, Lawton managed to get control of the town and the mines. It shows up to be one final showdown, especially with Kiryu making a pledge, after failing to save the kids.
桐生、このデュエルディスク、あんたらはここを俺の死に場所にはさせてくれないってことだ。俺は再び死神に戻る。奴らを本当の地獄に引きずり落としてやる。
The Grim Reaper is back. There's something magical about that harmonica sound, the sunset, and Kiryu making his way back into the town, a new passion burning in his heart, allies backing him up. There's just one thing left to do: take down the bastard who enslaved the town. The beauty of this entire arc was to showcase that Kiryu was a broken man, someone who was willing to put his life on the line since he didn't feel like he deserved to live the life after everything he did as a dark signer. And that's where Lawton comes into play. An antagonist who actually represents the darkness of Kiryu's heart. If you think about it, what was the one thing that drove Kiryu to lose himself? It was his desire to rule over the entirety of Satellite, wiping out almost all the other duel gangs on the streets, and even taking on sector security, using those who trusted him as tools and using underhanded tactics eventually to get what he wanted. And what does Lawton do? He takes over Crashtown using underhanded tactics, betraying the trust of even his own flesh and blood, and being brutal throughout the entire process. It's not a perfect one-to-one with Kiryu, but it does showcase a similar mindset, that the chase for power is one of destruction and mayhem, hurting those along the way and how easy it is to be blinded by it. It's touched on in the show, but really showcases how much Kiryu has grown.
だが今俺は、俺を信じてくれる何者かのために戦うことで、生きているという実感を得た。桐生、俺はもう逃げない。生きて戦うことで俺を信じる者へ応えていく。それが俺の新たなるデュエル。
And unlike Kiryu, Lawton isn't an actual honorable duelist.
お前までもがそんな汚え真似しやがるのか。それでもデュエリストか。
リアリストだ。
ロット。
バーバラの言う通りだ。勝敗は花から決まっていた。お前たちは最初から死んでいたんだ。この町に殺された亡者なんだよ。アディオス。
And here's another big difference between Kiryu and Lawton, though. It's that Kiryu didn't need to instill fear to have allies.
鉄砲玉のクロウ様の参上だぜ。クロウ。へ、優勢。あんまり。
Fuck you, Crow. Why'd you have to be so cool in this scene?
I only lay a hand on a woman if she lays hers on a child.
Without the Japanese music and sound effects, this just sounds lame. Sorry, Jack. But yeah, Team Satisfaction reunited, and with his friends with his back, Kiryu chases Lawton down to finish their duel, with one final challenge at the sunset. Lawton, having the advantage with a monster that can wipe out Kiryu with one shot, and no hesitation uses that effect, confident that he can win, even considering Kiryu's backup plan.
俺は墓地からインフェルニティデスガンマンとインフェルニティクライマーの効果を発動した。分かってるな。俺のデッキの一番上がモンスターだった場合、俺の勝ちだ。それ以外のカードだった場合は俺の負け。
Let's break this down because this is a moment where we see Kiryu come full circle. It's not just a card play, it's a straight up psychological takedown that shows how far Kiryu has come from the guy who was dueling on a knife's edge earlier in Crashtown. Back when Kiryu was rolling into town, his Infinity deck was all about that high risk, handless gamble, living on the edge, top decking whatever fate threw of him, almost like he was begging the cards to end it for him. But here? Nah, this is calculated. This is Kiryu taking control, not leaving it up to luck. The setup. Lawton's got his long barrel ogre out, ready to blast Kiryu's Infinity Doom Dragon and seal the deal. But Kiryu chains from the graveyard with Infinity Death Gunman, a card that basically turns the duel into a Wild West standoff. Its effect? It negates the burn damage, then forces Lawton to pick his poison. Either take the risk of taking the damage that would end him or Kiryu, or not allow Kiryu to take any damage for the rest of the turn. Now here's the genius misdirection. Earlier in the duel, before Lawton bailed like a coward, Kiryu had used an effect to put a spell card, bullet, and cartridge right on top of his deck. Lawton knows this. He is counting on it. So cocky as all hell, he picks the option. He thinks because the top card isn't a monster, the gamble flops, and Kiryu takes the hit instead. Death Gunman's effect is determined if Kiryu picks up a monster from the top of his deck or not. If it's a monster, Lawton will take the damage and lose. Anything else, well, Kiryu will lose. You see, earlier, Kiryu announced another graveyard effect alongside Death Gunman, Infinity Climber. This sneaky little devil's ability, when activated from the grave and chained with something like this, it climbs right back to the top of the deck, overriding that spell card placement. Now the top card is Climber, a monster. Lawton pulls the trigger thinking he's safe, but nope, the reveal hits. Monster Cardo. The damage goes right to Lawton's temple, dropping him to 0. No luck involved, just pure strategy, foresight, and a trap that Lawton walked right into because he underestimated Kiryu's growth. This isn't the old Kiryu betting his life on a coin flip or a card draw. This is the redeemed leader of Team Satisfaction, using his bonds and his brains to outplay a tyrant. It's the perfect capstone to his arc, from chasing power through destruction to wielding it for protection, and doing it with style. With the duel falling with the setting sun, we put an end to this chapter. With Crashtown, there's a lot to be said with this arc. Now, I've been a long-time fan of Yugioh, almost since the day it was announced, but there's something special about an arc or former villain when they reflect upon the actions they took upon as a villain. A villain like Maximilian Pegasus didn't really need an arc like that. In fact, he was effectively killed off in the original manga, and he didn't get a full-on redemption arc in the anime. He was just redeemed eventually. The villains in GX are a bit more complicated, but they were more of a victim of the main character in a pretty messy and admittedly convoluted storytelling. But it's not really a full-on redemption arc either. Please go check out this video, it's awesome. Kiryu actually had to deal with a lot of the emotional turmoil that came with him being a pretty devastating villain, and Crashtown did a lot of work to help him not only through his feelings, but come to a realization that he still had people in his life who cared for him, despite the fact that he had hurt them. We as humans live long lives, and most of us will make mistakes, some bigger than others, and at times we can feel like there's nothing more than we can do than wait for the day our bodies give out. Kiryu was willing to sacrifice everything just so he could get away from this guilt, but as Crashtown showed me, you can't give up. You will have people who help you and have your back, and you can always find hope in darkness. Crashtown as an arc is a great story of redemption. Not just redemption for Kiryu to prove to others, because that's not the point. It's to prove to himself that he was allowed to live. Not only that, but to find a new purpose in his life after the horrible things he did. It's honestly a conclusion for a villain that I can say made me feel satisfied. But what do you guys think? Did you like the Crashtown arc? I left out a lot of details and such, so if you want to go check out the arc, I highly suggest you do. You won't regret it. And do it in the Japanese version if possible, mainly because of the fact there's blatant censorship and some really weak choices in music, among a common. Thanks for watching. Hey, major thanks to my supporters on Patreon, Ko-Fi, and channel members. These amazing people like Bloody Eclipse, Red Jester, Emily Infinite, Raven Gutiana, Odd Emerald Zone, Atheon, Saki Eclipse, Miles Vega, Mike Soul, and Shadow Pain. Thanks again for supporting me. Your contributions help me and my editors continue to make amazing content for you all to enjoy. And if you want to see your name amongst these great people, check things out down below in the description to find out how. And hey, if you liked the video, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and if you're on mobile, use the hype feature to help push the video more into the algorithm. This stuff helps out well, and most of it is free. And if you reach this part of the video, YouTube thinks you'd like to see these videos, so be sure to check them out. My comment out.